Yeah, because we got Warden McCindy home now.
Oh, is that right? Here comes Hammy.
Yeah, well, I'm here and I'm looking at Cindy, and she's home from work now, giving me that eye.
All right, Hammy. Well, take
Are
it.
you using the mobile app today? Would you like to round up?
All right. Well, this is a whole new show now. Like this is a whole other this is because we also do like to like we were saying in the beginning to really to keep things like
mixed up,
casual, cool. We're not out to get anybody unless people are really should be gotten.
Yeah, serious when we got to be serious. You want to throw in a laugh track or something now and then, it's good.
You can hear the bird in the background.
Yeah, she's been pretty quiet.
Well, Cindy got home. That's Cindy is Hammy's wife.
Yes.
She manages a McDonald's.
Yes. She works for one of them corporations that pushes something that is really good for people.
That's exactly what I was talking about. You have to really think about what you're pushing.
Obesity food.
She sells obesity.
That's right. That's right. See, we're all culpable in some. We're all culpable in some ways. There's no.
Would you like a large obese?
Yeah.
There is no
like obese that meal today.
There is no ethical consumption within capitalism. We're all
it's like with McDonald's. Why is their ice cream machine always broken?
Well, that's its own podcast right there.
It really is. That's like a conspiracy theory of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is.
It really is.
A&W right next door always has root beer floats every day. But you can go to McDonald's. Can I get a shake today? No.
These cats wound up in court for making a little part you could buy to plug into the machines and keep them working.
That's right. That's right. See, this is the opening. Yeah. See, this is the opening. We didn't know what we had for an opening yet, but this is it. The ending is the beginning.
It's the court fight.
That?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool because this is the Hot Car Podcast.
Yeah, I told you that. Remember, we were waiting on that part.
Tuesday, and we know it was really hot that day. Hot car. Joining us live in the Alert Center.
How long did you last in a hot car?
Facts that the heat index that day was 105 degrees.
Hot car. We don't yet know about a potential third suspect who was seen speeding away from federal agents at the scene. The whole thing has been a mystery to neighbors.
This is not an accident. This is pure negligence.
I just think, especially with some of the subject matter that we're covering and kind of have been covering with my podcast partner, a guy named Alexi Lindez, for the past 5 years, dealing with the troubled teen industry. We found that, some lightness, brought to the conversation is often very, helpful.
Oh yeah, anything.
Well, because some of this
find a way to lighten it up a little bit because it can get pretty. Some things that I look at get awful dark.
I mean, every story is like pretty much a disaster. With the exception of the idea that, people have the ability or the determination or whatever it is to transcend some of the abuse that they suffered as just people. This stuff is really more impactful when it happens to people as kids because, we don't know shit and like everything is brand new. And all of these ideas about how social dynamics and the family works. I mean, we're, as young people, we're coming into this stuff and learning about it, and the idea that young people should come into the world and be very, thought of as very precious in a lot of circles, especially, pre-birth and all of that, right? Like, God forbid. So, and then very shortly after that, as far as like the society is concerned, we don't place a whole lot of emphasis on the well-being of kids. That's kind of an afterthought, really, and they're annoying and they cause problems and, they're expensive and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Sure. It's like, yeah. I mean, I would never recommend anybody having children, first of all. I mean, I'm really kind of an anti-natalist in a lot of ways these days. I mean, I never wanted a child. I have a daughter. She's like the light of my life, and I wouldn't want it any other way. but I certainly never wanted to have kids. And I think that, you know, you really have to want to have children to,
Oh, you do. And my wife and I have too, and we definitely had to try for a while. So it's a blessing, but it's a lot of dedication, and you need
it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
really. Otherwise, it's a lot of care and attention, and it's your whole life focus at that point.
Right. And
Correct.
and the other side of things,
Forever
like
and ever.
and with Hammy, I want Hammy to say some stuff here because it's really important because he's coming into all of this kind of conversation about the troubled teen industry and all of that stuff really as a more or less blank slate in the sense that he wasn't aware of like how big and I mean some of the details and stuff because he's quite the opposite of that. Like his value towards his family is of the highest caliber you could possibly imagine. It's everything, right? So the whole idea of shipping your kid off, whether it's subsidized by the state or you're paying like thousands of dollars out of your pocket, it doesn't matter. He would never conceive of something like that. So who are the people who would think otherwise, right? Who would say, "Oh yes, I'm certainly willing to ship my kid away." Take it away, Hammy.
I look at it like this: they didn't really have love for their child in the beginning. They're already ready to ship off that kid. Imagine what else they're just passing off in their life.
Right.
And most of it is because they have money. Most of the people that are doing this have big old bank accounts. Oh, we're good. Back when the 70s, we were going to send you to reform school, which is like military school. And then it's evolved to what we got today, which is wild.
Right. There is actually, I looked up, and this was really interesting to me. There is a school, because check this out. So since we've been doing all this stuff, I've always been looking kind of in a kind of half joking way for like the good one, right? Like of all of these facilities and programs, like all you ever hear about really, like sincerely about what really goes on in all of them is bad. You get people saying, "Oh, it saved my life." You get people saying all kinds of things about their experiences within these facilities and communities. And they say that stuff in spite of all of the negative stuff that happened, right? Like, hey,
Right.
that didn't necessarily affect me in the way that it affected that guy over there, right? So therefore, I'm okay with it. And that tells a lot about just society because those are also a few degrees further. Those are also the students who become staff. And actually, some of them, a smaller degree of those people who were quote unquote troubled teens, who were shipped away, they complied with the programs, they leveled up in the programs, they became brainwashed and authoritative within the programs and with all the peer-to-peer pressure that they put down on the kids below them was recognized and understood by the staff who oftentimes will take a stand back and stand by approach. It's very important too to understand that kind of dynamic within the troubled teen structures. They use a lot of this peer-to-peer pressure because it really takes it just takes your hands off of it completely because this big kid's going to handle it, that kind of.
Oh yeah, it's about handing it to the group.
Right. So some of these people actually start their own programs. Like it gets that crazy, when you can like. So that being said, what that really says to me is that the whole system is entirely corrupt and it really needs to be shut down. Like the whole concept needs to be totally reevaluated, and any program that exists needs to be paused and evaluated and shut down. All of them.
Oh, like completely.
Every single one of them.
A hard reset.
I still, like I was saying initially before this rant, was that where's the good one? Well, maybe I found it. Maybe I found the good one. And it's a little bit of a hybrid, and I'm going to look it up here. It's run by the National Guard in California. It's a free residential kind of like an alternative high school. And they basically give you twice as many credits as you really deserve.
Alternative school.
It's an alternative school, but it's also a residential alternative school, which is a little bit different. And from what I can, I think because it's run by the military, in conjunction with the school district, I think it might be the good one. Interesting.
Yeah,
it's
ran
free
by the military, and nowadays it may follow some better standards.
Well, there are certainly standards, and I don't know what circumstances are pulling these kids into this program from. Probably pretty harrowing in a lot of cases. Probably not good. As far as the kids' personal situations are concerned, I'm sure there are a lot of. No one likes this, right? No one's saying, hey, that's cool and good. No one wants that to be a thing that exists, really, to have that school exist to whip these kids.
And no matter what, there's situations where someone needs help. It's just about finding a better way.
So what I'm saying is there really aren't any good ones out there in that kind of format and system. And I don't see any other.
It's hard.
I don't see any really good alternatives to the idea of having your
good
kid.
Alternative would be a free program.
Well, right, and that's kind of what I was saying with this thing down in California, but it's a government sponsored thing with the school district, and they probably have a lot better standards, and they're not going to be allowed to formally abuse the kids, and that's kind of what it comes down to. This is all formalized in these troubled teen programs. It's not just kind of like, oh, there's a bad egg doing some bad shit over there in this regularly okay kind of situation. It's the whole program is dedicated to brain, like you were saying, it really is a brainwashing system, and it's not that difficult to do if you're dealing with people who don't really have any rights. They don't have any rights as kids, and the parents basically have signed their parental rights away to these institutions, at least partially. The parents in a lot of cases don't even know what's going on.
Correct. Because the kids are going in there, they're saying, the parents saying the kids are the ones with the problem. But if you get down to it, there's probably nothing wrong with that child when it got there. It was the circle he was living in. It could have been abusive parents, abusive other family members. And all this talk we're doing now, all I'm getting is we're focusing on that kid. None of these programs focus on the rest of the family being involved. The mom.
Oh, yeah.
Right, exactly. These are troubled parents we're really talking about, or troubled families in general, or whatever the case is, but really not.
I wasn't a troubled kid.
A kid.
My parents had an alcohol problem.
Right.
And they admit that. They drank too much alcohol. And back in the 70s, it was yes, sir, no, sir. You speak when spoken to. When the street lights came on, you were home.
Sure.
Don't argue about it.
Sure.
So, and when the family if there was no such thing, send them to the program, there was a twig outside. There was other ways that the family got together. Didn't ship them off. That's giving up.
Yeah, and these kids and these now adults and these people who are really fighting back have really felt given up on. By the whole fucking society.
And that's what's happening with all the crime today. In Myrtle Creek, Oregon, all of this is because people have given up on them. Oh, they're bad kids. They're always going to be like that. So, no, we're a bad society. We're bad adults. We should be covering them kids, even though we create the kids in our society. They're not born that way. Us adults create them kids.
Right. So it looks like the other alternative is just to ignore the kids, right? The so-called troubled teens, ignore them, and then let them shoot each other in the street. How about that? That's not a solution. But you know what? There are people I swear to God, there are people out there who think okay, I guess that's a suitable solution. Let's let them shoot at each other. And then no attention is paid to, like you were just about to say, mental health issues that are rampant.
Correct. It's like with me. I was out of my mental health meds for 9 days because they did not have any in stock and they couldn't get it. So luckily, I've got a good circle of friends and all that where I can chat with this. But there's some people out there who just snap.
Oh, yeah.
The mental health program is screwy. Me without my mental health meds for 9 days, yeehaw, that was a ride.
You ever see a kid withdrawing, let's say a fucking 5-year-old kid withdrawing from amphetamines?
Correct.
Dude, in school, bro?
Hmm?
The kid is falling out in school because he's all doped up, and they couldn't make the fucking delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And now the kid's getting blamed because he's
Or
having
acting out in school. We see it every day.
he's having like heavy body load, and he's
They
having
did that
like
to my brother.
he's having hallucinations. He's feeling sick. He's feeling anxious. He wants to fucking scream and hit something because he's withdrawing from drugs. Right.
Right.
And they're like, oh, that kid's bad. Oh no, he's just sick, bro.
So he's all better when we give him his meds. Of course.
Well, right. But the whole thing about in a lot of these cases, we're going to get to kind of the whole meat and the agenda here, like in a second. But like the whole thing, a lot of cases, like I was talking to our new kind of, I think he's kind of like the show like mascot, and I think that's very cool. Our buddy Rocco Fowler. Now, no, he's great. I love this guy because he will absolutely tell it like it is. But he was talking about, before, like his father was killed, and then he got shuttled off to a terrible foster home with the Southern Baptist Convention children's homes, and it was all very terrible. But they doped him up on drugs that he had nothing ever had to do with in the real world. He was talking about getting like they would like give him shots, in their butts all the time, and put him in these silent white wood paneled rooms that looked out onto an empty field. And they had to sit there for hours and days, doped up on like Thorazine. That's not any kind of solution. But this guy, he's like, oh, hell no, I'm going to tell everybody all about it. And, man, that guy's
They're going to give him more dope.
He's got a lot of wisdom. And because there's so many facets to all of this stuff. And it really, really, really just comes down to the idea that like brutalizing and kidnapping and keeping kids captive is in any way a good idea. Like, it just has to be like looked at as one of the most ridiculous things we do to each other. And all this, like, I mean, this is my rant. This is my fucking show. I'm going to say what I want to say. But,
correct. Like the big word, I think, is recidivism. It's when
sure.
How many people go back to prison when they get out.
Right.
I bet you there's more people that stay out of prison than relapse these teens going into these programs. I haven't checked that out, but man, I'm going to get on that.
Well, there's a whole bunch of different pipelines that like the troubled teen industry leads to, and they're not good. Like it's prison, it's suicide, it's bad stuff. Like, and then
See, the other way, all that stuff leads you to prison.
Well,
They brag to me that. Sorry, they brag to us that like 93+% of us would wind up in long-term institutions.
After the fact or before.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't go there.
They said as adults that no matter what, you better listen to us because 93% of you are going to wind up in institutions for your life or death.
Gotcha. No, I understand that. That's the threat. That's exactly.
I don't know what the real number was, but I had like 93% of us would wind up gone or in prison.
Yeah. Were they right?
The only people's names that I really remember, most of them ended up dying of drug overdoses or something similar.
Right. That's
I went to prison, but I didn't overdose.
Gotcha.
I was one that it was called the McLaren Hall way back when in LA.
So you were a part of this stuff, Hammy. I mean, you were a part of this. You really
now
were.
that we're talking about it, being a teen, now it's just bringing up flashbacks.
Well, you know that
Flashback when I was in the East LA, the juvenile hall there,
right?
And they busted my hand.
Yeah,
I was in prison technically for setting fires.
Sure. Right. Well, that a lot of the private prisons now own the teen facilities as well. Like that's all a big conglomeration too. The
Tucson, Arizona.
The prison companies also own the teen facilities too now. It's not they're pretty much in the same playbook. Yeah, that's
correct.
Any institutionalization as a kid. I mean, really, if you want to talk about people like have extremes, critical support of like just like prison abolition in general, like they shouldn't exist in general, kind of a thing, except for the most extreme like violent serial killer type of like situations where those people just need to be put away somewhere. Like financial crimes, even many violent crimes would not be punished by incarceration. There would be other ways to do things like limiting like your freedoms in the real world in some ways.
Yeah.
Right, not locking you up into a box. Right, some other kinds of preventions that are pretty, feasible. We don't really want to get into that right now. I don't think that's a wholly different decision. Abolition. But certainly teen prison abolition, I think, is something that really should be on the books. It should not exist. There are other preventions, like I said, other than in perhaps like the most extreme situations, which are far less likely to exist with young people if they're actually being taken care of. Adults have other agendas. Who knows what's going on with those guys? But in most cases, the troubled teen label, it's so broad. It can be anything from what they're calling, phone addiction to, the kid's trying to stab his ops. Either way, and they're all grouped into the same kind of bundle, and that's not good. The video game guy, he doesn't want to get stabbed by the gang guy, and the gang guy doesn't really. They're probably friends. You don't know. So, all right, let's get into what's going on here. So, do you guys have? Are you able to pull up the little agenda thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it up.
All right, you guys good to go?
Yes.
All right. I kind of talk. I have to talk myself out sometimes to kind of get like grounded. So. That's good. I think that was a pretty good monologue.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I felt it.
That's good.
All right. Okay. So. Oh, thank you.
Well, there's more.
All right. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Hot Car Podcast, and today, I, Marcus, am with Hammy. Say his name. Hammy.
Hammy. Yeah.
Yes.
If you know, you know.
All right. Wow. It's going to be one of those kind of deals, huh? Okay. We're just having fun with sound pads. I want to program some of these things too, more like specifically, because I think the ones that we're using are the built-ins right now.
Correct.
So, welcome to the 10th episode.
Make me get evil on you.
Oh, that's right. He's got the voice modulator too over there. Jesus Christ. We're in trouble now.
Yeah, my sister's here too.
Wonderful. Oh, wait. I thought we were going to have a guest, like a virtual guest whose name was Look Listen. That, I think, kind of like...
Look, listen.
All right. So, I want to talk about Paris Hilton.
Sure got quiet.
Well, see, that's part of the problem. Like, you say Paris Hilton, and people go, "Oh, like who? Like, okay, whatever." But she's actually kind of an important figure in this whole world of the troubled teen industry, and the reason that is because prior to her being kind of an out on the town Hollywood party girl with, Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan and Kim Kardashian. Prior to all that, she was, I don't know, she was smoking, straight West Coasting, hanging out with the boys, like, a rich heiress, like, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old. She got sent away to this place in Utah called the Provo Canyon School, which has since been shut down because the abuses there were so like horrific, literally, deaths and rapes, and all kinds of torturous things like being wrapped in carpets and being left in rooms by yourself for hours, like wrapped in a heavy carpet, stuff like that. And so she went through some of that stuff. and it only became known, fairly recently. But she wrote a book, as those people do, and she disclosed all this information, and then decided to take some action with some advocacy for a national bill that requires these facilities to provide full disclosure to the federal government about their practices. It doesn't prevent them from doing any of these things, to be clear. They can still do all of the restraints and the drugging and the isolation. They can still do all that stuff without fear of repercussion, as long as the kid doesn't die. But they have to tell everybody what they're doing, which initially I thought was not that great. But the idea is that it's data collection. So the more information people have, the more scrutiny can be put on these places, and more pressure can be applied to close them. Basically, is kind of the idea. And I wanted to give a shout out to friends of the show, Chelsea Maldonado and Jenna Bullis, for their contributions to this advocacy as also survivors, and working alongside in a kind of investigative journalism and legalistic and marketing fashion with all of this. They have their own organization, and I don't know what that is, but anyway, I wanted to let them know that we see you doing that. So that's very cool. Then there's also a new documentary series out on, I think it's called Investigation Discovery, and then it's also on Max. This 4-part series about these independent fundamentalist Baptist church school homes where all this abuse went on, and over the years, and they did this documentary about it, and these brave women are coming out and talking about all this stuff about how these pastors and youth pastors abused people, and they got shipped around the country so they could do it again. And so that's kind of being brought out, and that's a good thing that's being disclosed. That's excellent. So there's this fundamenting head. They go to dance around to each woman and their stories, kind of in a non-linear fashion. It was kind of a little bit difficult to follow. I wish it was more straightforward, because they jumped around a bunch. But then he'd pop up every once in a while, sitting at a desk, talking kind of about almost like the male perspective of how these women were treated, from kind of that innocent, hey, I was brought up in this stuff too. I certainly didn't, participate in any of this kind of negative behavior, but as a young man growing up in this culture, I saw it, and it can give some explanation about, how it all worked. So now he's getting all of these threats and private messages, and people being really rude, because of his participation. And I just wanted to express solidarity with Eric, and to condemn the negative messages he's receiving, and to encourage everybody to stand against that kind of harassment, and defend people who are advocating for changes in this kind of thing, because we don't need another documentary about women being abused, they're coming. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming down the pipeline.
In January of 2022, there was an interview with Diane Smith Howard, the managing attorney for criminal and juvenile justice. The interview discusses the NDRN's report, Desperation Without Dignity, which documents the trend of abuse, neglect for non- and for-profit residential treatment centers. So that was just January of 2022.
Is this for just in general?
Just in general.
This is just across the board, men, women, and children, right?
Correct. Yes. It's a topic that in some cases, these centers have been accused of physical and sexual abuse, torture, and even death. So in January 2020, well, a couple years ago,
Yeah.
they're on it hard.
Well, the problem is whenever you get a small group of people in absolute authority over a larger group of people who are kept in, confined, you're going to get this stuff happening. In every case, like, we can talk about any case where people are like kept in this kind of conditions, and there's always stuff like that happens. It always becomes kind of cultish. No
That's
matter.
why we have to remember the abuse hotline, 1-800-4A-CHILD. That's all you have to remember. 1-800-422-4453. A lot of people, they just don't talk about it. They may see something, but I'm not going to say nothing. Well, that's what has to happen. People got to start opening their mouth.
Right, but yes, absolutely, no question about that. Also, be aware. Be very aware that the state itself has quite a bit of authority over deciding whether or not that you are allowed to ship your kid away, or this idea of losing custody for maybe not such a good reason. Like those, there is a whole huge problem with the Oregon Department of Human Services.
Correct. That's
that just goes back for years and years and years, and all of the lies and abuses, and all of the people just put through hell.
I went through that with my 4 kids. Yes.
Yeah. So, right. Be aware, point it out in some way if it's at all safe, but also be aware that if you're not absolutely 100% sure that something terrible is going on, and you're wrong, that kid could still be removed. It's a tightrope, and it's always go back to the idea of just make sure that the kids are okay. If we can all make sure that, to the best of our abilities in whatever sphere of influence we have, over the opinions and perspectives of other people, especially when it comes to, what we're talking about is, today the troubled teen industry in general, and Stephen's story specifically, which we're going to get into right about now. And I want to introduce our guest today, Stephen, to the show. And what he's going to talk about is it connects the importance of disclosure in the troubled teen industry to his experiences, why this is important to get out there specifically, and then to look at it in general across the board. So I'd like to welcome you, Stephen, to the Hot Car Podcast. It's pretty hot in here already.
Oh, it is.
All right. So as far as your understanding, I'm just want to let you talk about stuff. From your understanding, can you kind of just explain to anyone who may not understand what the kind of specifically from your perspective, what the troubled teen industry is?
Oh, so the troubled teen industry,
from your point of view, what does that mean to you?
It's a group of systems and structures put in place that when a kid is deemed a problem, that's where we ship them off to, and they're going to be ignored there and go through that system for however amount of time that the state or parents need to keep them there. And in my specific case, and in our area, most of the places here are really funded by the state and supported by DHS and the juvenile court systems.
You're in Iowa?
Yes. Yep.
That's an area that I'm relatively unfamiliar with as far as those facilities and systems. I mean, Utah and Montana are really the kings of this kind of stuff, but they are everywhere, to be clear. So much focus is put on Utah and Montana because they, for a long time, had a lot more freedoms, even less regulation.
Right, and I think a lot of it's about where I tend to see a lot more stories come out and people coming out to speak is where the real private funded places for-profit organizations have been able to thrive.
Right, and especially the ones that, in a lot of cases, the ones that have shut down too.
Right.
Because it becomes a lot more, maybe not a lot more, but more comfortable to speak out in a lot of these cases, because at least it's not this ever-present thing looming over people. I mean, it really feels like that. I have my own kind of experiences with like a cultish kind of thing, like hanging over my past, and with Scientology. In fact, they have for years like tracked me down and followed me around. Like, and this was something I did for. I got kind of roped into like working for them when I was like 19 to about 21 years old through a front organization, and it was like the most mind-bending experience. But back to the idea of these places still being open and people being less than willing to speak about it while they exist. It's because they're scary, right? It's not like they will take action, you know, and you know, they have their own, you know, anti TTI PR like campaigns, you know, that are kind of low key.
Oh yeah,
they
there's
exist,
definitely there's the brochures and marketing campaigns that they put up and the websites, and then there's the truth of what happens that you can't get people to speak about. And my experience is I turned 18 in 2003, so I was right around 99 to 2003 about that point. So I don't know a lot about how things go today, but I know one of the same organizations that ran one of the worst systems back then is still out there today, and they're getting the bulk of the state's money for foster care funding and organizing the whole thing now.
Sure. And there are also like really notorious places like Sunset Bay Academy in Tijuana, Mexico. They have a PO box address in San Diego, so they're actually like an American company sort of, but they are headquartered or located in Mexico. And once you get into that area, man, all bets are off, because no one knows what the hell's going on there at all. Like it's
don't get out of the country for sure.
No, but the thing is like these people don't have a choice. That's the other aspect of this.
Right.
That they'll tie parents into contracts that really just don't allow them to do anything, and they can, if they have an American subsidiary, they can justify sending you anywhere. Like
I've seen adults getting, like, people still being stuck there when they're adults.
Oh, in some cases
they could be kept
up. In some cases they could be kept until they're like 26.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a group I was in recently that was fundraising and doing some other efforts to try to arrange the paperwork and travel to get someone out of there.
Oh, good.
Wow.
And in that case, I believe they got her to wherever she could call home and away from it. But I believe she was like 22, 23 and was pretty much being tucked away and hidden for whatever reason.
No, I know stories directly about that kind of stuff where you just have to like get people out of there and dump them. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. So I want to kind of, get into, why you're here and like share a little bit about the circumstances that led you into being involved in this kind of thing in the first place. Like what happened?
Yeah.
What your initial placement, that kind of thing. Like
it was, my initial placements were through DHS when I was 13, and things were rough at home. There was alcohol, other troubles that were stacking up, but I was a bit rebellious. To clarify, the rebellion was over wanting to go to some event with a youth group at my church, things of that nature. There was no cigarettes, no alcohol, no drugs. It was just wanting to be out and do things with the church, and then whatever else was going on. There was some situations at home that I would just run away for the evening, get away, and there was an abuse circumstance that I essentially covered up what was going on at home. And then the following Monday, a parent went to DHS and turned around the story and reported it on me instead. So then there was a whole case with the social worker opened up for about 6 months until finally I just ran away for the weekend, and the state took me out and put me in the youth shelter to start it all off. But it was all compounded off of these the lies and stories that had started the DHS case. So then when it got in front of a judge, they put me into the Four Oaks system here back in '99. And the court, there was a group home, behavior treatment center, things of that nature. But what they were treating me for was for being abusive to my mom and like this complete opposite story. And it followed the pattern, like it was state regulated, but that's very loose. Like we were locked in isolation rooms. There was physical restraints. We were taken to the ground with 3, 4, 5 adults on top of us. It was the entire game level system, but they couldn't wrap you in carpets. They could do everything else. You were against the wall. You were in the room. So it was, yeah, it's like some of the crazy abuses, sexual abuse, things of that nature. I'm sure I heard stories, so I know there was things, but things that was some of the very extreme public humiliation things didn't necessarily take place, but the forced confessionals and the groups and the attack therapies and all of that was still what it was based on. It was very Sea-Doo and Synanon and mixed with, they modeled everything and bragged about Dr. Albert Ellis is the name to add to the conversation. He started this whole cognitive behavioral therapy pattern that they were ramping up and basing everything on in the 90s when they said, oh, okay, the problems happen, let's go fix it now and do it better. But they molded it after the same systems and just worked in even more BS on top of it. It's about breaking you down first and what's the methods behind it and then what way they try to mold you back up. So it's all the brainwash mentality, those types of things that you read about and hear out of that. And that was the goal. So it was like Four Oaks. I probably traveled the Four Oaks system for at least a year and a half before I had a short break just being in a foster home. And in that year and a half, Four Oaks ran this system that they had a short-term residential facility that could be up to 6 weeks. Then if you needed it, which of course most people would, they could ship you downstairs to the 6 to 12 month program. No matter what, because you were in either one, you were going to end up going to the day treatment program, which sounds a lot like the California National Guard system that we were talking about. And so you run that whole works, and I had to do 6 months in the long-term program. So I did about 7 months of residential, 6, 7 months of day treatment.
And they kept you in Iowa for all this?
Yep, this system was all in Iowa. I was what they call they court order you in juvenile court. Second you hit juvenile court, at that time you would at least have a minimum what they call a China petition put on you. It's a child in need of assistance. So you get assigned a state public defender for kids, essentially, a social worker, and then a judge is deciding your fate based on whatever process and reports they get. And so I went from, once I ran away from home and left the stuff, it was a matter of, sorry, I just had an odd car drive past me. So once I left home, it hit the judge. I got the China petition on me. There was the stories about me beating my mom. So then they shipped me off into Four Oaks. I did 6 weeks in short term, 6 months in the long term, and then day treatment. Sorry, a police officer circling by me. I'm ironically hanging out in a hot car, perfectly fine, but in a park to where it's kind of small town, so maybe odd people get suspicious for no reason. And for me, that was kind of the start of it. It was everyone hit the shelter first while they were sort of in the waiting phase. Unless you had done, if you'd gotten in trouble, we had every district in the state has a juvenile detention center that operates a bit more like a jail. And to be honest, that was other than a youth shelter, the time I spent in the detention center was the nicest anyone was to me.
It's a jail.
Yeah, they're not messing around. They don't want problems. They're not pushing and creating problems. They don't operate off those systems. It's jail, and they treated you like humans, which is kind of crazy to look back at the place that would be the jail and say at least that's where they treated me like a human. After that was done, it was 2000 after 9/11, when the towers came down. I was back in the youth shelter again. I'd learned that My foster parents were going to be essentially quitting foster care.
All right. How old were you then?
I turned 16 that year.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was about to turn 16, like a month before school was starting, so a bit before, about July of that year. My foster dad let me know that they were going to be leaving the system and be done, but that meant that I was going to be moving. But I wasn't supposed to know. Like, my foster mom didn't want to tell me. This is right before school was about to start. I'm done with day treatment. I'm supposed to just be in public school, etc. I have things lined up to graduate like a year early. Pretty much I just maximize the BS alternative school option that you have when you're in these places for extra credits. And then I'm supposed to just sit on the news that this is happening. So there'd been some argument or another about a week after school started, and I just went and spent the night at my foster cousin's house. And then I went to the police station the next day, said, well, I'm going to be in charge of my own fate, so I need you to call and get me in a shelter. We're going to go now. We're not waiting until a month when someone decides to tell me. So they brought me to the shelter. Sorry, do you need me to pause a second? I can get kind of rambling sometimes.
No, you're
just
perfect.
fair warning.
No, you're perfect. You take precedence. That's what I really want. This, because I don't want to interrupt your narrative too much. But what I was expressing was, wow, that's pretty great that you like kind of took that initiative. I mean, it's like, because at a certain point, like, stuff needs to start happening.
Yeah, it was. I mean, once I know, and it's hard to just stay in the norm, and because it was school and getting done with school early. That was kind of the one thing that I was leaning on to somehow get me out of the system sooner. Right? Is if I get out of school early, they have to let me go to college early. They have to let me go to college. So that's all I really focused on.
That makes sense.
Is I can get out early. So this happens. I get to the police station, turn myself in. I'm in the shelter. Right around 9/11, my social worker came to visit. She explained that they weren't going to be able to find the 16-year-old male in foster home, and that her boss was not going to let them keep paying the extra $30 a day that the youth shelter costs compared to the group homes. So they had a recommendation to send me to, I want to say, Clarinda. It's a town in Iowa, so it was the name of the facility at that time. They were going to send me to Clarinda, I believe, or Toledo. It's hard for me. I intermix those two, but essentially they were the step before, like the state boys prison, Eldora, the state boys training school. So it was the last stop. Yeah. So usually, the way that the system worked, you'd got your first criminal charge or something had happened. That okay, we're going to give you one chance at Clarinda for a 6 to 9 month stint, and if you mess up again, you're going to the state prison. I hadn't had any charges. I left to avoid the thing, and I was going to go to save $30, $40 a day. So then I started acting out a bit, ran away from the shelter, whatever. Like, it's this whole I'm going to be in charge of my fate, not the judge thing, after a couple of years already in the system and learning the game. Yeah. So then I wind up in the detention center for a month. My lawyer comes to me with this fancy brochure that looks really pretty of the Rabiner Treatment Center, Boys Ranch, outside Fort Dodge. I believe it's actually Webster, Iowa, or Manson, Iowa. It's somewhere over there by Fort Dodge. And it is shut down now. Now they're a little outreach office in downtown Fort Dodge or something else. Essentially, a couple of years ago, the state quietly pulled their funding and acted like nothing was wrong after they'd been running out there for decades. But then she brings this brochure, so we get convinced, okay, well, that's got to be better than the last stop on my road to boys prison for no reason, so let's go. And I was out there about 9 months, and that was its whole own ordeal.
Yeah, you want to get into it, or you want to take a break, or?
Probably pause for just a second, and then we can get into unpack that a little bit more. Sure. Not necessarily pause, but just slow down a second.
Yeah, because that's just really like kind of another like big. It's like the kind of the major chapter regarding like TTI, I guess, in a sense. Yeah. Yeah,
I think that's the main one for me that I'm wanting to unpack is that Rabiner Treatment Center, and yeah, it's the one that it fits the mold just as much, even maybe a little bit more so with the how they sell it with this brochure out with an acreage type discussion around it. But it was operated by the State Police Association.
Oh, interesting.
So the board the board was most of the boys ranch was mostly made up of the state police association, and they'd had this massive acreage back in the 60s, I think.
Yeah.
Had been donated to the state after, I think this couple's son had died in a car accident. I can't remember the details of the story, so I don't even want to. And it's just ran by the state police association all the time. And it used to be, I'm not sure what, I feel like it started in the 70s. They ran under Jerry Rabiner Boys Ranch for the longest time. And it was like this
You're 100%
farm type ranch.
correct. Because my dad used to donate to the boys' ranch.
Yep. And
a monthly thing.
And then in the 90s, something had happened, and there was a hard reset in the wave of the redo of the system in the 90s that came about. This whole thing modeled off Albert Ellis and Synanon and Sea-Doo and all that. That took over and was this huge push, and places popped up everywhere. So they renamed Rabiner Treatment Center and brought in new directors out of another facility that had been doing well. And that's the place I entered. So I don't know much other than it was an old farm, and I can't find anything on the internet on this place. So it was still so when I came in, the director the first day pulled me up into the administration building, and it's the whole march with your hands behind your back, look where you're expected to look, stop at tape lines everywhere, etc. Get up against the wall, stare at the wall while we yell at you. And he's screaming at me about, he had been best friends with my foster dad. And he's screaming at me about how I abused my foster parents, stole from my foster parents. I'm a horrible kid. I'm this, that, and the other. And my mission is to make your life a living effing hell while you were here.
Right.
So then I already knew the game. So we go into the confessional thing. So I have to write whatever paperwork of things I did wrong that screamed about how I'm this horrible person. But at this point, I knew not to be passive anymore and to give them some amount back. I knew that they needed to treat me for this violent kid that they thought I was. So I have to yell back when they get in my face. I can't just be quiet. I have to go ahead and instigate it. So there was a 3-month phase at least of down to the floor restraints, at least weekly. And that was, I mean, and it's because you talk back. You don't even have to cuss at someone, but you take the wall and stand at the wall with attitude, and you slouch, and maybe you kick your chair with your heel a little bit so it slides like 8 inches over, like show off that you have this little bit of attitude, so that you give them the reason to jump you. And that's how you're going to end up. You have to work the level system if you're going to get there, and it starts with letting them break you. So it was 3 months of going ahead and giving them just what I thought was just enough to just go ahead and break me. And it wound up with there was a night where they didn't take the string out of my sweatpants, and they left me I was in a room for probably 6 hours at least. And I can't remember what the restraint was, what the hell the excuse was that got me into the room, but our isolation room was full. They had to drag me out through the snow into a cabin across the campus. They take my shirt off, all these other things, calling it suicide watch, leave me just in my sweatpants, but they didn't take the string. So after 6 hours of being put in there and no one checking on me and calling it suicide watch, and I'm freezing, whatever, it's okay. The way I'm going to get out of here in my head is I have to show them attempted suicide, I suppose. So I tie this string around my neck, and I didn't have to. I should have gone to the hospital. No one brought me. There was one staff that was very concerned and stayed extra afterward, checked on me over and over, things like this. Like every now and then you'd run into someone that had a heart, but no one was allowed to call anyone. And I was turning purple. I couldn't breathe by the time someone finally checked in, and it kept going for another month or two. And really that place, that was the worst of it. It was that, and the lack of an education, and continuing to be beat down, and these group punishments is what it was always about. When you got up to the special level 4, then you'd have your designated hall monitor per day. So they were that classic, they're in charge of the snitches role, and they're going to get in trouble and pushed down if they don't properly punish and help abuse the little guys just coming in, making you do the work for them while they sat behind their desk and did whatever the minimum notes for the day were. And I can't remember speaking with a real therapist, right? There's like one or two staff there that split all the kids, all the boys. So there was never any real attempt at help and what do people need. It was just the level system and the normal and the attack therapies and abuses that they put you through. And the fact that they're ran by the state police. Yeah. And long before inflation, you pull up tax records on this place, since it's nonprofit, supposedly. It's all out there. There was like 12, 20 mil years. We didn't get and go through $25 million worth of care. So then, and I can't find anything, so it's all speculation from here. But you're ran by the State Police Association, who helps with scholarships for police's children, pensions, retirements, etc. It's a nonprofit funneling up to a nonprofit. The extra funds are going to go up to the parent umbrella company of the whole thing, and they get distributed out through their extra causes. So where did 25 mil worth of revenue that disappears since it's a nonprofit wind up, and where's the record of that stuff? So you kept funneling us through this system forever to then end up, on my thoughts, paying for someone else's scholarship off of the extra money that you made and retirements. And then they ended up being investigated in 2018, 2017. Someone was trying to investigate them for some abuse reports they'd gotten. And they were dodging submitting paperwork, etc. And that's all you can find on it for about a year and a half worth of very few headlines. And then they just quietly lost their state funding. So for about 6 to 9 months in 2018, they stayed open off of beds they were selling to like Wisconsin and Minnesota before they finally had to shut down and sell the property out to a private company finally, who now runs a wedding event center ranch that they're setting up on the old property. So if you go out there, like the old gym and school is a wedding hall. The cabins are like eventually to, I suppose, all to be remodeled as like resort cabins to go camp and stay out for these weddings, whatever else. So it's a bit odd to see that. It's good to see it closed. And these people the people running this place, I do want to give them some credit. Yeah, so these folks, they're completely separated. Right. It's different people that I believe may have their own questions on what happened on whatever land they wound up with.
That could
because
be
from what I saw, I walked onto the property once when this all struck me, and my old cabin was still what it was.
Right.
My bed from 23 years ago was still in that bedroom through the window. Incredible. It was just tossed over on the floor, like the old school projectors. We were out my wife and I were out in the area for our anniversary. There's this spot, Grotto of the Redemption, over in west central Iowa. It's about an hour from there, and we were out to eat for dinner, and for some reason, like looking for a spot to eat and looking at the maps, oh shit, we're right by this place. So then immediately I'm just like, it was the worst day and worst time to notice that, because my head checks out.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm zoned out and I'm done until we leave and go drive to this place, because right now that's all I know and all I'm thinking about was being close to there. And to be honest, they weren't the place that broke me. It was the 18 months in Four Oaks. They taught me the game.
Yeah.
It was the fact that I went into this place and they immediately set up another lie to set the stage for why they were about to run me through the goddamn game again. Like, right. Oh man. Sure. And our tax dollars keep them open. The leadership of this last place, and I'm do everything not to drop names, but I am so furious. Like it took me forever. Like my wife could tell you, like she probably thought I lost it. The amount of time it took me to even do research based on little pieces of stories that I remember to folks to get past. Like it's hard for me to even remember the Mr. whatever your last name is. You're like an imprint in my memory, and I know what you did, and I have your face and I have your words, and that'll always be there. But hell, if I remember your name, there's way too many places people.
Right.
On and on.
No, I get it. Like in my experience,
I finally found the old CEO's name, and he went and
you looked it up.
He's running he's overseeing a place for autistic children.
Yeah, that's common.
Outpatient and inpatient. Like you guys went and brought this guy that cut his teeth his entire career doing the shit they did to me. Your autistic kids. One big organization I know in the Midwest that's still running and operates a lot of facilities is Sequel. Yeah. Comes to mind. I mean, then like I said, Four Oaks, we didn't deep dive into them, but they're the organization that's still left running and operating things in the state. So I'm very interested to hear, and just can't find anything on what the current state of their facilities is. They survived the test of time, and they're still out there. Whatever they do nowadays, I don't know. But I think they're a topic for a different time, and one that I have to kind of work into. They run. Last I knew, they still have group homes in operation. I'm just not exactly sure where.
They own and operate them?
Yeah.
Like in-house kind of operation thing?
Yeah, the place that, when I was in the short-term to long-term residential, and then the day treatment, that was a facility ran by Four Oaks.
Right, so they have DHS contracts.
Yeah, they have DHS state contracts. Yeah. I'm sure some amount of private funding too.
Sure. I'm slightly
and then they operate different facilities around the state. Yeah, I hope they have turned their ways around, but they were, like I said, their system, they were the ones who taught me the game. Like it took 3 weeks of like 2 grown men that used to work in prisons, like physically throwing me around the isolation room, to teach me what it was that I'd done wrong that I needed to confess to in the like attack therapy confessional groups.
Right.
And this was like hands-on, grabbing you, throwing you between the 2 men, throwing you on the floor against a concrete wall, smashing chairs, like the old wooden school desk chairs.
Wow.
Throwing those at you, smashing those against the wall, all while just cursing you out, your horrible names, you're this, that, and the other, while you piece together throughout it what it is that you're supposed to be. And then I started out, but I had to do 6 confessional groups at that place, because I started out with 2 pieces of paper and had to work up until I went out with a stack of 30 pieces of paper or stories that were entirely fabricated. But the things that I'd done wrong to get me there.
Right. And, I think that's a good and really dramatic kind of place to kind of end things. I know that Hammy has to get out of here. Also, it's kind of incredible that you went through all of this and it got to this point. And remind everybody, what was the terrible crime that you committed?
Oh, I ran away from home. In the end, the real crime is I ran away. Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought I might be muted. I ran away from home to avoid getting screamed and cursed at.
Right.
And didn't point fingers to a police officer at my parent.
Yeah.
So it was incredible. It was pointed back at me in self-defense.
Yeah.
On the other end, and then it just went from there.
Yeah.
People that mattered realized it a few years in, and I made it through. It's just getting the message out there. I think today it's just people need to understand this goes on. And if you were there and made it through these things, then there's hope, right?
There's hope through that kind of understanding. And where's an outlet? Well, places like this.
Well, it's happened again.
This happened on Tuesday, and we know it was really hot that day. Hot car. Joining us live in the Alert Center.
How long did you last in a hot car?
Facts that the heat index that day was 105 degrees. Hot car.
We don't yet know about a potential third suspect who was seen speeding away from federal agents at the scene. The whole thing had been a mystery to neighbors.
Hot car.
This is not an accident. This is pure negligence.